We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's January 5th here in Seoul. I'm Xingyun, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Cheska Dainhong.
Happy Friday, everyone.
Happy Friday, and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed that covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. K-pop's influence is no doubt massive. That's why Lisa from K-pop girl group Blackpink has even earned the title as the most influential figure in her home country, Thailand. Local news outlets conducted a survey in December last year. 3 out of 10 surveyed chose Lisa as the most influential figure. The K-pop singer topped high-profile politicians and celebrities, including the former leader of the country's Move Forward Party. The wall of Seoul's Gyeongbokgung Palace has been unveiled to the public on Thursday after going through weeks of restoration. Back in December, in 2 separate incidents, some vandals spray-painted on the walls of the palace. The Cultural Heritage Administration on Thursday said that the restoration is around 80% complete. Officials also said they're planning to seek compensation for costs from the 3 suspects. The restoration costs are estimated to be at least $76,000. During wintertime in Korea, a popular activity is going to frozen lakes near Gangwon-do province and attending fishing festivals. One of the most iconic ones is the Hwacheon Sancheoneo Ice Festival, where visitors grab trout with their bare hands or try out ice fishing. This festival will kick off tomorrow, but for years, many animal rights activists criticized organizers over the event, especially the bare hand fishing event. Animal rights activists pointed to how the thousands of trout released in a closed area are fighting for their lives in a vulnerable and malnourished state. Also, given the fact that many families participate in the event, activists worry that children may develop a wrong understanding of how to treat animals. And despite these sorts of fishing festivals receiving backlash from animal rights activists, there's still around 36 regions in the country hosting them, and that's mainly for 2 reasons. 1, these fishing festivals attract a lot of visitors. 2, animals that are considered edible or are raised for the purpose of being eaten aren't protected by Korea's animal rights protection law. So here in the studio, what do you guys think about Korea holding these fishing festival events? Usually we see them around this time of the year, winter time, to attract more people from Seoul to come to the rural areas for regional development. What are your thoughts on that? At the same time, what are your thoughts on South Korea's animal rights protection law not protecting livestock or animals raised for the purpose of being eaten?
Well, it's hard to say as a person who enjoys fishing and also enjoys meat, so it's hard for me to take the sides of animal rights groups, but I do respect them in that way. Now, as for the festival, I do think the way that they catch them is quite inhumane. I do think it puts the fish under a lot of stress. However, the argument is that just fishing in general would also put a lot of stress on the animal itself. So it's hard for me to, again, argue that point as well. But when it comes to, obviously, the rights of animals and the way that we should be raising them, I think it's going to be difficult for Korea because we are a meat-loving country.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of our food revolves around meat, and the demand for it is so high that I can't imagine us changing those rules anytime soon. But yes, I do agree that there needs to be change within those rules.
I agree as well. And at the same time, I do empathize with local governments and how they're using fishing festivals like this because it's an iconic festival that's only held during wintertime that attracts more visitors and helps revitalize the economy there. But once again, for animal rights perspectives, it's not the best, right?
You know, it's such a tricky question, and Grace, you pointed out perfectly because this experience is very iconic, one, and it does give a pretty great experience for families and especially children because they actually get to literally and metaphorically get their hands on this experience, right? However, I do agree on the latter part of the point that you made where there isn't a law to protect livestock because there have been very interesting psychological studies where the meat actually gets contaminated if you put psychological stress or physical stress on the animal. I too eat meat, and I would rather have the animals raised in a very happy life and have a happy ending so that it's better for us as humans and better for the animals as well.
I completely agree. I think you mentioned a really great point there. It also couldn't be beneficial for us if these animals are put under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see what happens from tomorrow as the festival will kick off. In the meantime, let's head into our main discussion topic of the day. One recent Korean movie has topped over 12 million admissions as of this this week. My AI voice secretary will tell you more about it.
12/12, the day. A historical saga depicting South Korea's military coup in 1979 has officially claimed the title of being the most viewed film released in 2023. Since its release on November 22nd, it has had over 12 million viewers at theaters. It's soon to reach the 12.2 million admissions achieved by hit 2017 historical drama Taxi Driver. 12/12 the day shows the heart-pounding 9-hour military coup of December 12, 1979 that brought John Do-won to power. Chun ruled as president of South Korea from 1980 to 88. He's notorious for seizing power via coup and deploying military troops to suppress civilian protests in the southwestern city of Gwangju. The use of military troops left hundreds of civilians dead and muted democratic movements in the country for years.
12/12 the day has definitely attracted more people to the theaters, including myself, as the title of the movie in Korean could literally be translated as Seoul Spring. Some are saying we may see spring hit the K-movie industry. Here at the studio, what do you guys think?
You know, at the end of last year, the film Spring in Seoul achieved a blockbuster success, crossing in the 10 million viewership mark. And concurrently, there's a sequel to the series featuring Admiral Lee Sun-shin titled Noryang. And these movies are continuing to thrive, contributing to the fueled surge in people actually visiting theaters at the moment. And I think there are two notable things about this trend that is going on, which is that both movies are related to a South Korean history, and also the people that are visiting the theater are actually in their 20s and 30s, meaning that our generation is having a keen interest in learning about the South Korean history and actually going to the theaters. And this is such a positive sign because after COVID, there have been definitely a downside to going to theater. So I really hope that this trend definitely continues.
Exactly. I think I was the many millennials who are interested in history, and also we're seeing things on the news related to historical figures or events, which is why that really questioned me to go to the theaters and see how it could be fictionally depicted as well. But Walter, what do you think? Do you think more people will flock to movie theaters starting this year?
Well, I hope so, but it obviously depends on the caliber of the movies that are coming out this year. Now, I'm really hoping to see South Korea continue to produce more and more great K-film content. But the only problem is being, people like myself being too lazy to actually go and, would rather stay home and watch movies on their phone or on their TVs. But on the flip side, Netflix Korea recently upped their subscription fee. So maybe people might go back to the movies because now Netflix or other streaming services are becoming too expensive to have all the time.
But I think you mentioned another great point there. Due to OTT platforms flourishing, nowadays, not a lot of people are actually going to movie theaters to watch films, which is why many were surprised to see 12/12 the day garner so much attention. With the advent of streaming and OTT platforms, some choose to just wear their PJs and comfortably stream movies online. But there seems to be specific types of movies, like as we mentioned, 12/12 the day, that are attracting millennials and Gen Zs to the theater. What do you guys think are the popularity factors behind these specific movies?
You know, there was a great interview of Margot Robbie and Cillian Murphy, and I
Murphy.
brought him in specifically for you, Yeon, because I know
Shout out to Cillian.
I know you love Cillian. And they were talking about how Barbenheimer came to being and the appetite of audience. And Cillian actually said this great line that, quote, people don't want to be told what to watch.
That's a great line, Cillian.
Right.
You could have said hello and that would have been a great line for you.
It actually would be. Come on, Walter. But going back to the quote, I think this shows that our generation is not prone to the media or the marketing, but rather choosing the movies they want to watch. Because when the two movies came out together, people were saying people were going to choose just one. But actually, people ended up going to both of them because they're great movies. I think it's the same thing with the 12/12 of the day and the movies that our generation chooses to watch. It's about the storytelling and also the experience that people get from the movies that make us want to go to the theater.
And we mentioned my fan loving for Cillian Murphy, but I think that's another factor for me as well. Instead of just watching movies on like at home on OTT platforms, I think one way that I would like to show my support is by going to theaters, buying a physical ticket, and being physically there to watch the movies that's starring my favorite celebrity. Walter, what do you think makes some movies really attracting our generation to come to theaters?
Well, I'd actually have to take it from the opposite side of what we're not really interested in anymore. So I'm not sure what exactly we are looking for in our generation, the younger generation, but I know these days, and it does seem like that the superhero genre is becoming a bit too much for us these days. Now, it's sad to see Marvel and DC basically beat the horse to death, and it was a genre that was very dear to me because as a child I grew up watching a lot of the comic book movies and adaptations, etc. But superhero movies, have lost their edge and excitement. People are finding it hard to keep up with all the different characters as well as storylines and how they all tie in together.
Right.
I mean, the latest movie by Marvel called The Marvels was one of the worst Marvel movies in the box office, I hear.
This is Walter's personal opinion, by the way.
It was a lot of people's personal opinion. And it even showed that one of our most famous actors, Park Seo-joon, was in the movie. And it couldn't even attract that many Korean viewers. So it's showing that this generation seems to now be getting sick of the superhero movies.
I see. That's a good approach to take to find out what movies stand out. And speaking of standing out movies, 12/12 The Day passed the 10 million mark, which is a historical feat, especially for the K-movie theater industry. Why do you think that our generation in particular went out of their way to go to theaters to watch this movie, though?
So I have a very interesting anecdote to share. So I actually went to a movie talk with one of the stars of the movie, Jung Woo-sung. And this was before we hit the 10 million mark. And one of the interviewers was asking, what are you going to do if we hit the 10 million? And I think he was a bit surprised about the question. But he also said that he was quite surprised and pleasantly happy that the young generation came to watch the movie because we did not live through this history and it has been decades and decades ago that this has happened. So I think it shines a light on a lot of things, but most notably the fact that our generation cares deeply about the political scheme and also the environment that has been created for us to live in.
I also think it has to do with the grandson of the late President Chun Woo-won hitting the news stories. We've covered it on NewsGen a few times, hearing about his drug allegations and his apology on behalf of his late grandfather.
Right.
That garnered a lot of attention from our generation, which made them want to find out what happened for the late grandfather to come into power. But Walter, would you like to add on to the factors that made 12/12 The Day stand out?
Yeah, actually, I would have assumed that the younger generation wouldn't be interested in this movie because, as Jessica mentioned, it was some history that we didn't live through. I mean, it was way before even our time. But the thing about these movies, though it is dramatized and there are things in this movie that aren't factual or made twisted a little bit different, it does still show some part of the Korean history and what they went through. I mean, this movie, but trust our generation then to make a challenge about it. So the movie has actually spawned a challenge where while watching the movie, people would actually monitor their heartbeat because there are so many thrilling moments. There's so many edgy parts in the movie that make you feel very stressed. And so people would post online how fast their heart was beating. And that's definitely something that our younger generation will do, is make anything into a challenge.
Yay, social media.
All for the gram.
All for the gram.
You want to show people how enraged you were by monitoring your heartbeat on your watch.
Yeah.
And I also heard about this heart rate challenge and thought that there must be so many different unique challenges or trends that our generation is leading whenever we go to theaters. Would you guys like to elaborate?
Yeah, one of the things that I found very interesting, and I actually did a little bit of research because I wanted to know more about our generation too, and there were two things that I would like to point out. The first is so-called the reverse trend, and it's kind of when you go back to revisit the movies that you have liked. So that's one of the things that people do a lot. And also a very interesting thing is now people rely a lot on reviews. So instead of the first week being the peak time for the movies, now it's becoming more of the third and the fourth week where people kind of watch.
They test the waters.
Yes.
They see how other people are talking about it.
Exactly. They push their peers to go watch it first, and then when they come back with the reviews, then it prompts them to go to the movies. The other one that I found quite interesting is, of course, there are a lot of K-films that are popping up, but also rise of so-called the middling films, like the Japanese animations, or movies with a very nice and soft and warm storytelling. I think our generation are definitely drawn to something that gives them a lot of comfort. as well as something that can make their heartbeats go skyrocket to the sky.
I also think it has to do with efficiency. Our prioritization of efficiency and whether we're using our money right is a big factor. What about you?
Yeah, well, just I guess going on what Cheska said about the reverse trend as well. I've noticed that sometimes when the cinemas, they open older movies, very old movies, example like Titanic, though it was released over like 20 years ago, sometimes cinemas play replays of it and people go and watch it. And that's something that our generation loves to do, as well as watching a movie over and over again. And I think this comes down to a psychological aspect of it, as they know what's going to happen, they can predict what's going to happen, so therefore it's not as stressful to watch the movie again and again and again, or it's about reminiscing about the times of watching that movie. Me, I've watched movies more than 50 times before, so I understand where people come from in this situation.
Exactly, and we asked our viewers what they think makes Korean movies in particular stand out compared to other international movies. If you take a look at the screen, you can find out what 3 of our viewers said. Take a look. Now let's start with Leon. Leon said Korean movies are known for their compelling storytelling, rich character development, and unique cultural perspectives. Also, K-filmmakers often blend genres effectively, creating films with emotional depth and unpredictability. Tasmia said, I think the cinematography of the movies and the emotion delivery of the actors and the actresses is what makes Korean movies attractive. Graciela said, learning the values, customs, and behaviors of a technologically advanced society with very strict social values, which sometimes leads people to make tough decisions. Also, the legends and poetry that surround it. Thank you to all our viewers who shared what they had to say on what makes K-movies so attractive. And we're now going to include an actual film critic and expert in our talks to better analyze how promising the K-movie industry looks like for this year. We're going to talk to a film critic and professor at Kyungdong University to better predict what type of year it will be for Korean movies. Let's include Jason Beschervaes in our talks. Welcome, Professor Beschervaes.
Well, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Welcome back. Now, Professor, given that we're living in times where streaming movies online is so easy and OTT platforms are even making their own productions, how would you evaluate Korea's movie and movie theater industry right now?
Well, it's an interesting question. If we look at 2023, it was somewhat a mixed year. Fortunately, you've been talking quite eloquently about 12/12 the day, aka Seoul Spring, and it sold 12 million tickets. So it's ended the year on a high, together with Noryang as well, part of the Lee Sun-shin so-called trilogy. But actually, the year was somewhat challenging. Very much so, actually. I mean, if you look at the total admissions, it was 125.1 million admissions for 2023, with 60 or so million admissions for Korean films. And that is 45% down compared to pre-pandemic levels. So only a handful of films broke even. I mean, if you compare Korea's box office to other kind of major markets, looking at France, which was 13% below pre-pandemic levels, Germany 16.9%, Spain 23.9%, Japan just 12.9% compared to pre-pandemic levels, US 21%, and China 22.5%, Korea's 45%. So some things going on here. Korea was one of the biggest markets in the world, 5th or 6th top box office globally. It sank down that list quite considerably. And so I think in Korea, Korea's been somewhat of an unusual market, and what fascinates me, when it performs well, it performs extremely well. If you compare it to 10 years ago in 2013, 127 million tickets were sold to Korean films alone. And we saw, a whole range of films do really well. Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer, you've got Cold Eyes, and various other films, Miracle in Cell Number 7. Whereas, in 2023, the Roundup sequel did very well, selling over 12 million tickets, 12 a day as well.
Exactly.
We're not
Professor
seeing the
Bescherface, I'm
kind
sorry,
of-
due to time, we have to hear you up till there. But one last question I have for you then is what type of movies are actually breaking even in this relatively difficult situation for theaters?
Well, actually, it's films attracting young people. So we got Love Reset, which is a rom-com, Sleep as well, which follows a young couple. And you mentioned how Soul Spring has attracted young people. The same is true of No Yang. And also the Roundup sequel. So actually what's happening is younger people are going to the cinema, but we're not seeing older people, and that's where that's where before, Korea's box office has attracted whole, different generations of people, and there was a big growth area in those in their 40s and 50s. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So it's young people that are still coming out, but it's just we're not seeing the older generations coming out in the same way that they once did before the pandemic.
I see. Thank you so much, Professor Bescherface. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And as Professor Bescherface eloquently pointed out, I think our Korean movie industry needs to better combine the young generation and the old generation and make them flock to theaters. But in order for us to do that, what type of limitations should the movie industry jump over this year?
I actually had a lot of interviews and chats with the people in the industry, and one of the things that they kept mentioning was the storytelling.
Right.
Storytelling is always the key and the power that we have over any sort of technology. So I do hope that we develop our own storytelling and keep pushing forward in the movie industry.
Hopefully we'll see that. What about you, Walter?
I'd like to see Korea's version of Bollywood. Just keep to what we've got. We've got
dancing.
We've got two great genres in romantic films and also dark films. If we can make our own genre, that'd be fantastic.
Maybe being more unique.
More unique.
More unique. And I think Professor Bescherface mentioned a really important point. It's not only about attracting the younger viewers out there, but making a movie that's relatable to everyone, regardless of age, seems to be the key. Now, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Cheska Dainhong
Pleasure is always mine. Thank you.
and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
All right. Thank you everyone for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. And we are
News
Generation.
Generation.